there's a lot that goes into it outside of just where your fitness is. It's a life thing as well, decision that you have to make
Right.
to continue to pursue that kind of level. You're talking 415, 417, and what you're not taking, what the clock doesn't take into account is when you get to mile 10, 11 of the run and you know where you're at.
Yeah.
And the extra motivation, it's like, okay, here I am. I mean, this is everything I trained for and everything I've wanted for many years. I think, that would have brought that time down just a little bit more.
This episode of the Smart Athlete Podcast is brought to you by Solpre, skincare for athletes. Whether you're in the gym, on the mats, on the road, or in the pool, we protect your skin so you're more comfortable in your own body. To learn more, go to solpre.com.
Welcome to the Smart Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Funk. My guest today used to have a ton of certifications, and I will shortly ask him why he doesn't have those anymore, ranging from USA Triathlon, USA Cycling, Ironman Mentor, all kinds of things. But he is, at least I think still, coach of Paralympic gold medalist and world record holder Shawn Morelli. He is my coach. If you need accounting, he is a certified public accountant, so that makes him well qualified for being here on the Smart Athlete Podcast. And if you have not seen it, he really is kind of the progenitor of the show. On episode 1, he was my very first guest. Welcome to the show, Ryan Ross.
Wow, that makes me feel special. I didn't know that. Man, what a pioneer.
Well, see, and I thought too, we're a little low on scheduling right now, and I was like, you and I have plenty to talk about before we got going in the actual recording. We talked for like 40 minutes and had to cut off. But I kept thinking, I was like, you were in episode 1. I'm like, so I definitely want you to come back for episode 100 just because I like nice numbers. But that's...
And you've seen my workouts. I like nice even numbers and,
Right. I mean, I did that. I did, your workout this morning you set for me, an hour long, 5x5, easy run to tempo to 10K pace. Trying to avoid as many people, stay 6 feet away from them as I could. Not an easy task, so people don't seem to care. But
are we going to discuss social distancing and economic stimuluses and all this?
That is on there. It's all. I've got those topics. All the kind of good topics for us today. So some of this, I want to try to make as much of this like evergreen. So if you're listening to this in the future and we're past all of the coronavirus issues, I still want to make this podcast relevant to you. But obviously that's a big thing going on right now. So
yeah.
So first I have to ask. So I know you've lovingly chose to continue to coach me, even though you've moved away from coaching a lot of other people. So why drop all the certifications? Just is there like an ongoing fee you have to pay every year to keep them, or what's the deal?
Well, that is definitely part of it. There's ongoing fees, but there's also time in keeping those memberships as well. So it's time. It's like everything else in life. It's time and money type thing. And
right.
I did make a conscious decision a couple years ago to coach less people than what I had in the past.
Yeah.
And so there really just was not, when you consider the time and money, it did not make sense for me to continue to maintain those certifications. And I'm sure a lot of people can appreciate that, the certifications and the education and the continuing education, after a while, it's like, okay, and what additional incremental benefit am I getting from this? And so it was just really taking into account everything. It did not make a lot of sense.
Right. So sometimes I think about that too. For those listening on iTunes and are not familiar with the YouTube channel, I do a show on running called Runner's High. So I thought about that too, because I don't have any, I've not got my USATF certification or anything like that, but it's like I've been around so many coaches. I've helped coach a few people over the years, and officially been like a high school coach for a short time, and so it's like I have experience both coaching and in the developing side, especially considering I would consider myself a natural, not natural talent, in that I have some natural ability, but a lot of it is just simply grinding out what natural ability I have to a higher level. So it's like through that process, you have to learn all these little things that just reading a book don't necessarily tell you. So yeah, that's what I thought about for you too. It's like okay, if you don't pay your dues, you lose the certifications. It doesn't erase all the memory of all the things that you learned to like be able to coach all these people, you know. And if you're not marketing yourself predominantly as a coach anymore, then it's not as critical to have those either.
That's well said. And I think like in your situation, you were definitely, in my opinion, born with some natural ability to run well. And that gets you a really long way. And then you add a little bit of, like you said, the grit and grinding it out and the work ethic. You pile a little bit of work ethic on top of that natural ability, adds like the varying coaching you've had over your life. And then you get to a little bit higher level than what your natural ability has given you. So, it's hard to replace natural ability. I mean,
right. Well, and even I experienced that, and then the ceiling. When we started working together, I wanted very, very clear about I wanted to be a professional triathlete, and just that ceiling is just like right below that threshold, tantalizingly close. Or possibly had I not crashed at Eagle Man, I may have qualified there. That one, it bothers me in my mind because I know. So to qualify, I would have had to have finished about 4 hours, 15 minutes. And projected time, depending on how that run went, it would have been like 4:15 to 4:17, like right in there. Yeah. So that's one of those things. It's work left undone. But at the same time, like I mentioned on numerous episodes with numerous guests, I was so broken after that. I just don't have the will to put in the hours anymore to continue pursuing it. I spent so many years of my life on it that's like it was time for me to shift. But
well, maybe like you said, maybe it's just something that gave you the signal of where you're at. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it outside of just where your fitness is. It's just a life thing as well, decision that you have to make to continue to pursue that kind of level. You're talking 4:15, 4:17, and what you're not taking, what the clock doesn't take into account is when you get to mile 10, 11 of the run and where you're at.
Yeah.
And the extra motivation, it's like, okay, here I am. I mean, this is everything I trained for and everything I've wanted for many years. I think, that would have brought that time down just a little bit more.
Yeah, well, it's tough too because if I knew that, I think it would be tough because I would start getting emotional. Because even we were talking about this. We were talking about 10 Man, which is this last time I did it was only 50 people. And 10 Man was the very first time I ever won a race. So it kind of tells you like I have some talent obviously to win a race, but it's only 50 people, so it's not like nationals or the world championships or anything. But even there, like when it was like mile 4.5 and I passed the leader on the run and I knew it was basically mine to lose at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was having a hard time keeping it together because it'd been almost 20 years of racing and never winning. And like it right now I'm trying not to cry just thinking about it. Like it's still that vivid in my head that it was that important. I'd spent so many hours and years in literal blood, sweat, and tears, like trying to get to that point of just winning something.
Yeah.
That it was like I really had to just focus on one step at a time. Don't think about the finish line because like my breathing was starting to get like ragged and screwed up.
You gotta relax.
Yeah. So it's like relax. So that's the other thing too. Having gone through that and had I got to the end of that 70.3, I think ignorance is almost bliss, where it's like maybe I'm there, maybe I'm not there. Just gut it out as hard as you can, get everybody you can, and just see how the chips fall. But
that's kind of the challenging thing about the 70.3 you're talking about is you don't, in regards to that qualification, you don't actually know specifically, where you're at type thing, which makes
it because people are so spread out. It's hard to be like, yes, there was this many people. Yeah. You lose people in transition. You lose people on the bot. Like it gets so, and even if you have, like my girlfriend comes with me to races and she tries to keep track of people, but there's so many people, it's hard to always keep track of that's the age group guy, or that's the overall, or that's, they're doing the shorter distance and they're on the like, it just becomes a cluster and it's hard to keep track of all those things.
Yeah, it does. That's one of the to a triathlon we were talking about, like the spectator friendly part, and it's not like running loops or running laps around the track, is it? Back in the old day, huh?
No, and well, even then, people, I recall a specific 5K at University of Central Missouri that they had dedicated lap counters. So each lap counter had 2 runners, so that you wouldn't have, each lap counter wouldn't have a bunch of people to take care of. My lap counter lost a lap on me, and I'd come around and he'd say 10, and I'd say 11, and he'd say 11, and I'd say 12. I had on my watch. I had the laps on my watch. So I'm like, I was like, he clearly is not. And one of the other lap counters was like, had to correct him because I was running with somebody that they were counting. And so even running on the track is not, things
not an exact science.
Yeah, it should be.
I would think.
It should be. I feel like for the track, it's kind of a pain because you got so many athletes, but on the distance events, if you just chip timed everybody and had a chip lap counter on, at the start finish line, there's no question about did they run all their laps. Same thing happened to me at University of Iowa. We were running the DMR. I was running the mile leg at the end. I finished my mile in like 4:40, and they told me I had another lap to go, and I just gave up. So I ended up with an official mile time of like 6 minutes. And I was just like, I don't know what to do with you right now.
That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Huh.
So track is not as, it should be simple, but it's not as simple as we want it to be. So I want to kind of get to a little bit more kind of relevant topics besides my life. So I wanted to ask you about, obviously we're dealing with kind of lockdowns and shutdowns of businesses and the economy and everything right now with coronavirus. But so that makes a large impact on culture as a whole, as somebody goes running by my house here. But on a micro scale,
Were they maintaining their distance from the person next to them?
It's just one person, so out on the sidewalk.
Yeah,
so
I was
maintain distance from.
I took the family on a bike ride a couple days ago.
Yeah.
Family bike ride, about an hour. And we went through Heritage Park. You've been there.
Yeah.
It's a big park. Yeah. We won't even talk about what we witnessed there. It was pathetic.
Yeah, the track around the lake is like 2 miles, 2.2, something like that. I used to do brick workouts out there. And
that parking lot, there's like a marina parking lot.
Yeah.
There wasn't a parking space available in that parking lot. So it was very crowded.
Yeah, well, and that's why it continues to be an issue here.
Lack of social distancing.
Yeah. So what I want to ask you about though is like, obviously the intention of reducing the number of crowds together and stuff has canceled races, postponed races, which disrupts a lot of people's race seasons. And I've seen comments on Reddit and Facebook and other places, people getting really like unmotivated to do anything now that their races are canceled or postponed or whatever. They've been, training for these events. But coronavirus aside, and this is the part where I hope this is relevant, well past this time period, is that sometimes stuff just happens and races get canceled. You go to a race and it gets canceled, or you get a flat tire. I've certainly done that.
You know how that is, don't you?
I do, unfortunately. Yeah. And you crash and break a clavicle, or it's been a series of unfortunate events for me for the last like 3 years. But how do you deal with these like unforeseen changes in race schedules, things that you have no control over, and that change your perspective?
Yeah, this is like grief. This is like the stages of grief that some athletes are going to go through. I do think, though, that it's okay to have that initial reaction like a lot of people are having, like the loss of motivation. What do I do now? I think that's okay. I think you have to have that as part of your response. If you had if you had a big race, especially in this time frame of April to June kind of time frame of the loss. And you know what? I think that's okay. But I used to ask athletes I coach all the time when we would be on the topic of motivation, and you kind of know how I feel about that subject. I mean, it's everything. And I would say,
that's the title of your episode for episode 1. Motivation is
is
everything.
it? Yeah. So I would sometimes ask athletes, I'd say, well, let me ask you this. If there was no races, if there was no events, would you still do workouts? Would you still swim? Would you bike? Would you run? Whatever? Would you row? Would you still do your sport at all? And typically the answer is, I would do it, but I wouldn't do as much, or I wouldn't be as intense. And I think right now, for most of those athletes who had a spring race that's gone away, I think that's probably a really good place for them to be. Is you should still keep your body moving, because if nothing else, we have a huge mental health challenge going on in our country right now.
Right.
And we know that exercise helps that. And there's an increase in exercise activity right now. That's why when I went to the park the other day, when we rode through the park as a family on our bike ride, there were, like I said, no parking spots. People were walking, they were on bikes, they were doing Frisbee golf, all kinds of stuff. Equestrian, people were out and moving. And I think that that's really good. And the endurance athletes have to do that. You can't shut it down. You need to do exactly that. Now, you need to start out by just saying, I'm still going to exercise because I love it. You can't swim because no facilities are open.
Right.
But cycling, running, strength work, other modes of endurance activity are absolutely, open for season. And if anything, people have more time on their hands now because they have less options to do other things. And so still, I am hopeful that those who lost their event will at first, go through that initial, I'm depressed. It's almost like a grief type feeling. But then I hope that they'll continue to exercise and keep that going. Then after a while, the question is, what do you do now at that point? What's the mindset going to be in June? And a lot of it is, I would say, we don't know, because we don't know where the country is going to be at. We don't know where we're going to be at in this fight against this virus. So you got to have a little bit of patience. You got to bring some patience to it, I think. And there's going to be a lot of emotions at play, but I think being patient is a very important emotion. You can start to look for other events at that point. Or, I've talked to some people who are creating, us endurance athlete types are very type A, obviously. Very, motivated, goal-driven, processes, outcome-oriented, all that kinds of stuff. I think for a while, there's a need to be a little bit less type A and to explore your inner type B a little bit and relax a little bit. And not worry about it so much if you've lost your event, just kind of chill. And like I said, do exercise. Ride the bike, run, do your strength training, do whatever it might be that keeps you active and moving. But eventually, it could be time for some alternative type fitness goals. And I've seen a little bit of that as well. A lot of people talking about that. Of the few people that I coached, several have lost their events. And have thought about other types of goals that are a little bit more, they don't have the appeal of like doing a big event, but doing something like, I just want to focus on this aspect for a while. I'm going to focus on the bike. I have an athlete who made goals based upon their strength, their body strength, and wanting to improve that. So even if we're not able to jump back into event-oriented goals here in a couple months, you can definitely jump into other alternative types of goals so that you feed your type A, but even with feeding your type A, you still have to be motivated to do it. So it has to be a meaningful goal for you. It has to be something that's relevant to you. I think talking about that with, your coach, with other athletes about, hey, like, what are you doing, or what's motivating you, or, what's getting you up in the morning? What's your goals? Do you have anything? I mean, having those kind of conversations is really good because it helps get some ideas out there. But I think it's very possible to create, it may be an opportunity to create some unique goals that are still fitness oriented for yourself.